Hey, good afternoon. This is Dr. David A. Paget. This is Urban Geography, Maymester 2021, Tennessee State University. Um, and this is the second segment of the class for May the 3rd. And so we are looking at the individual term paper, which focuses upon geographic information systems application in the assessment of urban population vulnerability to COVID-19. And so these are the instructions for the individual term paper. Uh, and what we just did was we assigned, at least for those of us who are here, your cities for the analysis, and then you rank your cities from what you believe for now, without any kind of scientific investigation, which cities' populations are most vulnerable to COVID-19 to the least, just based upon what you've heard. So what's going to happen for the remainder of the week is if you go to the schedule, so the week 1 schedule is here. And so there's a Excel spreadsheet you can download, or if it's easier, there's a JPEG image of the schedule for this week that I don't think is going to change, but who knows. So as you can see on the 5th, no, excuse me, on the 6th, Thursday, we're going to have a working session on the individual project. So if you are looking at these instructions or thinking, oh my gosh, I have no idea what we're going to be doing, don't worry. We're going to, on Thursday, dedicate class time to working through, or at least showing you how to work through how to populate the GIS, Geographic Information Systems Attribute Table. So what you'll do is you will collect various data. I'll show you how to collect various data from a variety of sources, and then you will input those data into a spreadsheet, which will eventually become the attribute data table for your map. It'll be the information table for your map, and then you will use that map to conduct an analysis of your cities in terms of their vulnerability to COVID-19. And then after you have conducted your analysis, then you will re-rank your cities. And then you will write an essay, a series of essays based upon your results. And that'll essentially be your term paper. So in terms of the technical aspects of the project, we will work on that in class on Thursday. So you should not get hung up on the technical aspects. What I really want you to focus upon is the geographic analysis after you produce some maps. So we'll work through this together. No one will be left behind. And so don't worry about that. So that is your individual term paper. So you'll each do an individual term paper based upon your cities. You'll get some hands-on experience with GIS, and you'll get to spend more time thinking about COVID-19 is what it is. Okay. So the next major assignment on the syllabus, in addition to your assignments, you have an individual tape paper. This year, I'm very excited that we are going to be working on a project in support of the National Park Service and the community of Africatown. So there are a couple of articles here, in the syllabus. that give you background on the Africatown history, but just in a nutshell, um, I believe it was 1860. So in 1860, obviously, chattel, the enslavement of African people. I don't say slaves because that's just not a term. It's African people who were brought here and then enslaved. It wasn't as if a pool of slaves was waiting to be brought here to what would eventually become the United States of America. So in 1860, the shipment of African people, the shipment of human beings from Africa to this part of the world was illegal. But even though we know in 1860 in this country, the institution of slavery was alive and well, you just couldn't bring any more people over here from Africa. But of course, people will always try to get away with breaking the law. And so there was some individuals, let's say, who lived in Mobile, Alabama, who made a deal to kidnap Africans illegally from Africa and bring them to the United States. This was in 1860. They went to, I think, what is now known as Benin, country in West Africa, loaded up a ship called the Clotilda with, I believe, 110 African people and brought them to Mobile, Alabama, where they were discovered. Essentially, this was a pirate ship. It was a pirate ship. The Clotilda was a pirate ship. They had contraband, stolen human beings from Africa, clearly in violation of at least the laws against shipping Africans to the New World, so to speak, or to the Americas. Even though, obviously, in 1860 or so, I might be getting the dates wrong. That's why you need to read. Slavery was still alive and well in this country. But the pirates got caught and they tried to sink the ship. They dropped the Africans off in what is now Mobile, Alabama, or I guess at the time, Mobile, Alabama. And these African people were left to basically fend for themselves. And they formed a community called Africatown. So you have to understand the significance of this, but I'll get into this historical significance in a moment. So a couple of years ago, remember I said that the pirates tried to destroy the ship. A couple of years ago, the ship was rediscovered. And if you think about the historical significance, Africatown is the only settlement in this country that was built by African people. I mean, also there have been a series of interviews. Zora Neale Hurston wrote a book. I cannot remember the name of it right now. She wrote a book about one of the Africans, Cudjo, who was on the ship. First person interview of an individual who actually experienced the Middle Passage, right? So here was a living individual who actually experienced the Middle Passage and talked about it. And most of us can only say, oh, well, maybe my great grandfather, grandmother was brought here. Who knows if we even know our family history that well and know even who that individual is, since oftentimes Africans were sold from one plantation to the other, families were split apart, and so on and so forth. That's why in the South, if you're African American and you meet somebody, you might want to date them, you ask them, well, who are your people? Because if you ask them that and they start talking, you might find out that that's your cousin. And that's just the reality of it. That's what people did before 23andMe or AfricanAncestry.com, where you can swab your DNA and all of that. But so that's why Africatown is so unique in terms of the history of this country. And so the rediscovery of this ship last year or a couple of years ago brought enormous attention to Mobile, Alabama, and Africatown. And so you can read about it. It was a front page story in National Geographic. There's a segment of 60 Minutes that was dedicated to this. And so you might think, well, great. Africatown, Mobile, this is wonderful, but what the people, well, let me put it this way. If you were to go to Mobile, Alabama right now and go to Africatown, what you will find there is not tourist ready. Let's just say that. I mean, there's nothing, the welcome center is just not even under development yet. I'm not going to say there's nothing there, but there's nothing there that would support what we call heritage tourism, right? So heritage tourism, let me give you a really good example of heritage tourism, if you'll indulge me just for a moment to go a little bit off script. So, no. Okay, here we go. Okay, so this is the Whitney Plantation. So this is an example of what we call heritage tourism. So the Whitney Plantation, yes, it was a working sugarcane plantation in Louisiana. However, this isn't a typical plantation tour. If you've done a plantation tour, it's usually all about the landowners or slave owners. That's the story you get, and the Africans who were on the plantation are kind of a side story, or maybe no story. The Whitney Plantation tour is told from the perspective of the Africans who were enslaved on the Whitney Plantation. So it's a much, much different experience than you'd get at most plantation tours. And if you're a person that has any kind of emotion and you have, whether you're Black or not, when you hear about the level of brutality that occurred on this plantation or any plantation in the South, it just unbelievable, inhumane treatment. But yet, it's not all about that, but there's a lot of really rich and interesting history about what happened at places like the Whitney Plantation. So if you ever go to New Orleans, it's maybe 30 minutes northwest of New Orleans. I would implore it upon you, if you have to take a tour. You'll really get it'll really be a rich experience for you. But this is an example of heritage tourism. It's tourism based upon heritage. There's another one. Let me see if I can. I'm going kind of off script here. Let's see, Google. Okay, I got lucky. Activate Overtown. Here's another example of heritage tourism. So I'm sure some of you probably want to go to Miami. You've been to Miami. So you heard about South Beach and blah, blah, blah. But Overtown is an historically Black part of Miami. And actually, but what's happening in Miami is, as sea level rise is increasing, people with money, wealthier people, are starting to move inland. So South Beach, North Beach, West Palm, all those places are right on the ocean. And so as flooding becomes more frequent, people are looking inland to where Overtown is. So Overtown is maybe 10 minutes away from the ocean. I guess I can just show you where it is. Why not? Oops. It's Overtown, Miami. So here's Miami Beach. This is the part of Miami you hear all about, and Bal Harbor, so on and so forth. Miami Beach, which basically is an island. But the city of Miami is separate from Miami Beach. And so Overtown, as you can see, is an historic community. In near downtown Miami.
The world famous House of Mac is amazing. I just had to say that.
Oh yeah, yeah. I'll have to think about that. I'm after this class is over, after this 3 week of grind, I'm going to Miami. But yeah, I've been to Red Rooster. I've heard about the House of Mac. I've been to 305. What is it? 305 Crab Man. Been there. So yeah. So anyway, so Overtown is being encroached upon by developers. It's something that's called gentrification. What is this? Okay. Anybody familiar with the term gentrification?
Yes,
Yes.
they come in and they try to take, basically, I want to say like urban areas, and they try to get people to move out in order for them to redevelop it for, I guess, richer people.
Yeah, basically, if you break the word down, gentrification, the root of the word gentry refers to an elite class of people. And so gentrification occurs when, yeah, wealthier people move into what used to be low income communities. And we'll talk about this, but for a variety of reasons. But what's happening in Overtown is there are developers who are trying to buy up property in Overtown that is away from the ocean and is at a higher elevation. For example, there's this area called Wynwood here that's gotten kind of upscale. I'm from Baltimore. We would use a word called bougie. I know you've probably never heard that word, but more this Wynwood area, you know, you've got Little Haiti that's near here. So Wynwood is a kind of upscale. It's encroaching into Overtown. But the people of Overtown are not going down without a fight. So what they're trying to do is bring attention to the historical significance of their community so that they can preserve some of these sites. So I was actively involved in this effort. So if you go to Overtown right now, you see this page, Going Overtown. You can go to these various sites and use your mobile device and scan a QR code, and you'll get more information about these historical sites in Overtown that have significant Black history. And you know, I created the original base map for Overtown that has resulted in this, what you see here. It's like a walking tour of Overtown's historical sites. So this is another example of heritage tourism that I was directly involved with. Now you all will be directly involved with creating a story map. That's the name. Whoops, where's the assignment is here. I'm still working on it. Let's see, where is it? Okay, so just forgive me. This is still in the oven, but I'll post it at the end of the day today. So, but now this term paper is a group term paper. It's a collective effort. You all will be working on and building the real story map for Africatown, for the Africatown Connections Blueway. So I think I was reading somewhere on some of the comments about, I don't know, I guess since we've gone virtual, that you all are getting a lot of busy work. This is not busy work. This is for real. So the National Park Service approached me and wanted me to build this story map for Africatown, the same way that I built the story map for Overtown, for the Overtown community. And I said, wait, we have a lot of really smart students at TSU. I'm teaching urban geography. We should make this a class project. Okay, so this is a team effort. Um, I guess you all, I still don't know what a group me is. I'm old, but maybe like right now in the chat, you all should try to connect with each other because I think that's the, well, there are message boards connected to the class, but somebody should take leadership role in doing that. So you'll write a paper collectively as a class. Everybody get the same grade on this paper. But you will first start off with a literature review. This isn't on the page, so if you're looking for it, I'm still working on it. I'll be done with it later on today. So you start with literature review. The literature review, okay. What I would do is I would assign maybe one person to do the lit review. So literature review is basically a, I'll show you what one is later on. Let me see. Well, we'll talk about this more when we get to the work, but I just want to, literature review, a literature review is basically looking at information sources about this project. Now, I've already given you two sources. Here's a National Geographic story. That's one source. Feel free to use it. Another one is the 60 Minutes story. If you Google Africatown history, or if you Google the name of the ship, the Clotilda, you will get tons of information, okay? This has been one of the hottest stories in the country over the past couple of years. Now you might think I didn't hear anything about it. Well, I mean, a lot of people didn't hear anything about it, which is exactly why we're doing this. So you'll work directly with the Africatown Chess Organization. It's a community-based organization that is working to preserve and restore Africatown. So what the community of Mobile, what the Black people in Mobile want to do is essentially create something similar to the Whitney Plantation, where you'll have this story. Like I said, this story of the Clotilda, there's nothing else like it anywhere else in the country, okay? And you are going to get the opportunity to be a part of it. Park Service approached me. I said, I'm going to toss this to my students. I'm going to let my students do this so that when you graduate and somebody asks you, have you ever used GIS before? Have you ever done anything serious? Have you ever done anything real before? You can show them this map and say that, yes, you'll get credit for it, the whole nine. Will it be over in 3 weeks? Probably not, but we're going to try to get as much of it done as we can. And we'll have lots of help. But of course, because it's a project, actually it's a service learning project because you are doing a service. Our motto at TSU is what? Think, work, what? Serve. This is what we do. And so we're going to do a great service to the National Park Service and to the Chess Organization, everybody else that's involved with bringing this history to light. And it's not just about history. It's really about economic development. And this is what we talk about. We start talking about urban areas and economic development, jobs, housing, all that comes into play here. So what if we were able to take this historical site and turn it into a sustainable heritage tourism site that would bring millions of dollars to this community in Mobile? You'd have better schools for the kids, safer places, playgrounds, maybe some health clinics. All of that could be made possible with the development of this heritage tourism site. when I was in Africatown, I was there when 60 Minutes was filming. There were Black people who read about the story and just brought their kids. Now, there's really not much there. I mean, there's things there, but you wouldn't know it. There's, for example, the last structure that was actually built by the hands of the Africans who came over here on the Clotilda. That it's still standing, but you would drive right past it. You never know it was there. That should be a historical site. There's many other places of historical significance that are part of Africatown that the community wants to make part of this heritage tour. And let's just face it, we live in a competitive capitalist system. Do you think that people in the community of Africatown and Pritchard and Mobile, do you think they're the only people that don't see this money? As a matter of fact, I guess tomorrow, I'll talk about that in a minute. We're going to hear directly from the individuals that are working on with us. They're going to be guest speakers in our class tomorrow, and you'll get even more about what's happening right now. But there are millions and millions of dollars being poured into this development. That's money for contractors. That's money for all kinds of people. Remember, 60 Minutes was there. You can watch the segment, right? So what the people of Africatown do not want is for people to come in from the outside and cash in on their history. People to come in. I'll give you one example. I was in Africatown and I ran into this guy. I mean, look, I'm just going to say it. It was a white guy, and like no offense, from New York. This guy had a book deal to write about Africatown. He's not from Africatown. He's probably never been to Africatown, but he got a book deal to write about Africatown. Not somebody from Africatown who lives there. Not even there's actually an Africatown Descendants Association, right? There are people right now who can trace, who are the grandchildren and great grandchildren of some of the people that were on the boat, and it's not that they know exactly who the individual was who came over on the Clotilda, who was their relative, right? They don't have that. Those people don't have a book deal right now. But this guy from New York, he was down there. They were paying for him to be down there to write a book about this community. That's the kind of thing. I mean, okay, let me put it this way. It's great that the story will be told, but shouldn't it be told? Shouldn't the person who gets paid be the person that lived the history? Right? There's got to be somebody who can write in Africatown or in Mobile, at least, right? I can tell you from firsthand experience, in the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina in New Orleans, Lower Ninth Ward, they had these things that they call Katrina tours. Right? So after the recovery effort came back a little bit, maybe by 2007, 2008, they had what are called Katrina tours, where you could get on a bus and ride through the Lower Ninth Ward and look at the destruction, right? And maybe some efforts to recover. I think Brad Pitt built some houses in the Lower Ninth Ward, right? I'm on the Katrina tour thinking that the tour was created by people from New Orleans, people from the Lower Ninth Ward. You know, I was on the tour. I saw all these people holding up signs saying, "How can you profit from our pain?" You know, so what it was there were people who were not from New Orleans, weren't from the Lower Ninth Ward. You know, the Hurricane Katrina at that time was one of the greatest disasters we've ever seen, or worst disasters we've ever seen. 80% of the city was flooded. Nobody had ever seen anything like this, and we all know what happened in the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina, specifically from a Black urban perspective. So people wanted to see it. People were like, "Wow, but I thought, okay, I'll go on a Katrina tour because I'm sure, or I was sure, that the money from the Katrina tours was going to help in the recovery. No, I didn't do my due diligence. These people weren't even from New Orleans. They made up Katrina tours, collecting money that wasn't going anywhere near the lower Ninth Ward. So that's what the people of Africatown do not want. They don't want to be going on a tour of their own community and paying for it, right? Could happen. Has happened before in New Orleans. So, but the people, they're on top of it. And so part of this blue way, so you might ask, for what's a blue way? Well, you've heard of a greenway, right? We have greenways. You can go walking, biking, whatever. If you're in Atlanta, there's the Beltline in Atlanta. In Nashville, we have this whole greenway system throughout Nashville. And most cities now have these greenways. But a greenway is like a walking or bike path through a city. A blueway is a waterway. So what the Africatown Connections Blueway is, it's Mobile's is a Gulf Coast area city, and so there are obviously a lot of rivers and streams that flow eventually into the Gulf of Mexico, and there are places of historical significance. For example, there's a place where the Africans performed baptism ceremonies. There are other places along the rivers and tributaries throughout Africatown that have historical significance. But what the people of Africatown want to do is tie in that historical significance with recreational opportunities, okay, which should generate funds and really just give people in the community something to do. And there's so many efforts associated with that. I mean, this Blue Ways project is just part of it. Like I said, there are millions and millions and millions of dollars going into this, but we want to make sure that those resources go to the people and not to some exploitative outside interest or individual or what have you. So again, this is not busy work. Whatever we create in this class is real. It's for the National Park Service. And I'm going to be keeping an eye on you all. As you can see here in red, maybe I should bold this out. Maybe I should make it a larger font. So two of my work-aid research assistants graduated Saturday, so they're gone. And I think I have a line. I think I can hire like 4 students to work on this project after the class, if you want to. Typically for undergraduate students, okay, it's $10 per hour for up to 20 hours per week, but it's the experience is where it really pays off. So no, you're not going to get rich. Maybe you'll make $800,000 per month over the summer working part-time virtually. But yeah, so even after this class is over, we're going to continue to work on this. I'll be watching you all. So think of this as sort of like not a job interview, but if you put in a good effort and you're interested, you're truly inspired by this work, I do have funds to support probably, I know at least two of my students just graduated Saturday, and they're off to they're off to their lives beyond TSU. I think they both worked in my lab for about 3 years. It'd be hard to replace. So So again, this is a, okay, let me, group effort. I think I see some hands being raised. Let's see. Yes, Paul, you have a question?
Yes, so basically we are creating making the history of Africantown like more available to the people around the world, like who, since they don't have it really, like.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll talk a lot more about it on later in the week. You'll hear a lot more tomorrow about this. But again, this is a real thing. But of course, there's a term paper that's connected to it. But again, this is a group. This is a group term paper. So if you divide up the labor, and I haven't posted, as you can see, I'm still working on this assignment. So this will be up by tonight. But in the meantime, it's just a basic term paper format based upon the project, the ARC, the story map project. Let's see here. Let's get back here. Okay, so here we are. So on Thursday, we're going to have a working session about the Africatown Connections Blue Wave story map. So we'll actually have a working session in class. And then tomorrow, we're going to have 2 guest speakers, Miss Liz Smith-Inser from the National Park Service and Mr. Joe Womack from the Chess Organization in Mobile, Alabama. Okay, so that is your group term paper assignment, and that's in there. We talked about the article reviews already. And then, okay, so class participation. So again, I'm not going to take attendance in here, but I will be paying attention to who is here and who communicates. And so that will go into a class participation grade of up to 100 points. And just, I'm gonna have to edit out this. This won't be any, I'm not gonna subtract points. That's during the regular semester. In this case, it's part of your grade. So you will get a 100 points for the Africatown story map. Your individual paper is 100 points. There will be various assignments. You'll get a percentage out of that. So you have 2 this week. And of course, article reviews and class participation will make up for your total points. There will be a public transit field trip. I'll talk about that later. That's for extra credit. Normally with this class, we would take a bus ride. We would get on usually the Route 21 bus, because public transit is a big part of urban development and urban systems, and it's very controversial. Sometimes if you're from Atlanta, you've probably heard about MARTA and everything that went on with, that's the Metropolitan Atlanta Rapid Transit Authority. MARTA also has another name. I'm not gonna, but in Nashville, public transit is a hot button issue. We want to get people out of these cars. We want to have a more sustainable city. We don't want to burn all these fossil fuels. And Nashville traffic is, I don't even want to say it's bad in Nashville. Atlanta traffic is bad. I was in Atlanta last week and I couldn't wait to get out of there. I mean, it's horrible. I mean, I can't even describe it.
LA traffic. I said LA traffic is worse than Atlanta traffic.
Like, I heard LA is real bad.
I don't know. I mean, I've been both. Yeah, okay. The 405 in LA is if you haven't been to Los Angeles, you got the Santa Monica Freeway and you get the 405. The highways, I swear, are 20 lanes across, right? I'm not making this up. And every lane will be just jammed like all day. You can drive into LA. This is the only difference between Atlanta and LA. In Atlanta, usually after about 1 o'clock in the morning, depending upon where you are, you can still get around. In LA, you can go out at 3 o'clock in the morning. Like, what is going on here? It's all this traffic. It's crazy. But anyway, but public
Wait, so why
transit.
does traffic happen? Like, is it because of overpopulation or because people are going in like? Because I'll be confused. Like, we're all going the same direction. Why not we keep moving? Why don't we keep moving?
Well, we'll talk about this, but there are more cars than there are licensed drivers in this country. We have more cars than we can drive, seriously. And the infrastructure, the urban infrastructure of this country is designed for the automobile. Do you know that years ago, maybe about 80 or 90 years ago, Nashville and many other cities already had light rail? I mean, light rail that went everywhere. Not heavy rail, light rail. But once the oil companies got involved and saw that, oh, we don't want people on these trains. We want people riding in cars that burn gas. So what the big oil companies did was they bought up all of the light rail systems and tore them down so that people would only have one option, and that's to get into a car. Now, that was mostly in the South. Now, in the North, of course, if you're in Chicago, everybody rides the L. If you're in DC, Metro, if you're in New York, of course, you've got the subway system out on the West Coast in San Francisco, the Bay Area, you have BART. But for the most part, we've become a very car-dependent urban system nationally. And so if you're in some place like Houston and you don't have a car, oh my goodness, or LA, no car in LA. I mean, the way the urban landscape is in this country, it makes it's very difficult to get anywhere without a car. Or conversely, you can get anywhere in a car. When people come to this country for the first time, one of the things that they're amazed with is the fact that we can go just about anywhere in a car. That's not true in other parts of the world. In other parts of the world, if you've ever watched television and seen scenes where in other parts of the world where all these people are on bicycles and rickshaws and everything, that's because people just don't have cars like we have here. I mean, this is a very unique, a very unique system we have here. But what's also interesting is if you meet people from New York, I mean, people who are adults, a lot of people in New York never buy cars. They don't have to because the public transit network is that thorough. You can get anywhere in New York on the subway. A lot of people, they just don't ever, if they're in New York and they're gonna live in New York and they're not gonna go anywhere else, they don't ever buy an automobile. Don't need one. If you're just gonna be going around New York. Yeah, Carrington Powell, do you have a question? I'm sorry, I'm talking. See your hand up, or did I already answer it? Powell, Carrington? I guess she thought this guy's gonna keep talking.
Well,
He's not gonna.
I don't have a hand raised button.
Oh, that's fine.
But I think it's like really interesting, like when you were mentioning other parts of the world, like over in Europe, how they have the train system that they can take to different countries, and also like I kind of travel a lot. So like when I went to Cuba, I noticed, of course they had like the older cars, but there was a lot of people riding bikes, which like compared to New York, like what you mentioned before, like they don't really have a lot of cars. They use like subways a lot more, and also they use bikes.
But yeah, but for the most part, if you look at a lot of areas of this country, people have cars. We love cars here. Very difficult. And also in some parts of the country, maybe not in New York or Chicago or in San Francisco, but in the South, there's kind of a stigma about getting on public transit. I know I go to Atlanta a lot, and I usually stay in this area of town called Buckhead, and there's a MARTA station that has free parking. I park my car, and if I can get where I can get on MARTA in Atlanta, that's the last time I'm in my car. I'm not going to be on 285 or 75, 85 in that madness. Now last week, I didn't have that that luxury. I mean, I drove to Atlanta, so I had my car. I didn't, but usually if I'm there on business, I'll take the train. And when let's say if I have a meeting in the Atlanta University Center, that's where Spelman and Morehouse and Atlanta University are, and now Morris Brown is back. So you have those 4 HBCUs there. If I have a meeting there, people will ask me, well, Dr. Paget, how did you get here? I said, well, I took the train from Buckhead, and they'll look at me like, oh, you rode the train with those people? Like, with those people? I mean, and compared to the L in Chicago and New York City subway system, MARTA is pristine. It's very clean. It's, that West End station is a little shaky, but I mean, other than that, it's relatively okay, but people are just too foo-foo
They
to
bougie.
get on the train. I mean, they won't. So I said, you would rather sit in your car on 285 and creep along. Or if you're not creeping, Atlanta's crazy. Either you aren't going anywhere, or people are driving 100 miles per, 100 miles per, I'm not making this up. I mean, just speed limit. I saw somebody change a tire doing the speed limit in Atlanta last week. I mean, nobody drives the speed limit. I mean, it's crazy. I mean, it's crazy. I mean, it's not
It's
for the
so
faint.
funny. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but it's so funny that you mentioned that, because like I know, like when we were younger, we had the same kind of mindset, but I did like this little camp or whatever, and they made us like ride the bus, and it's honestly not even that bad. Like we were having conversations with the people who ride the bus, like it's just another form of transportation, but people just make it look like, oh yeah, you don't have money, so you got to ride the bus. Like it's really not even that bad. Those people just live like a normal life. They just ride the bus to get wherever they need to go. Like it's so funny that people like think like that.
Yeah, and it's the difficulty in getting more investment in public transit is because, for example, in Nashville, only 2% of people in Nashville use public transit regularly. 2%. And if you've ever ridden the bus in Nashville, it's not the wealthiest sector of the community. It's people who are on there because they got to be on the bus. So if you have the least powerful, least wealthy sector of the population riding the bus, and that's only 2%, how much is the city going to invest in transit? We've had several failed attempts to improve transit in Nashville over the past 5 or 6 years or so. We tried to put in a I guess it's called a basically a bus lane out West End. That failed. Then I think there was this big I think Mayor Barry tried to develop a transit system. That failed. That was a multi-billion-dollar endeavor. Okay, I see a lot of hands up. I think I saw Elijah's hand up first. Yes, Elijah.
Yeah, I was just gonna say. Oh, sorry.
Okay.
All right, can you hear me, Dr. Paget?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, so I was just gonna talk about how I think public transit is pretty cool. I know I had to, in Cincinnati, we have the like the railway. It's not a train, but it doesn't really go far. It goes about 12 blocks from downtown. It's over the Rhine. And then when I went to DC, I never paid for an Uber, didn't drive. DC, it was just the subway the whole week. And I just think it's cool that you get to experience that part of life in these eastern cities. So I don't have a problem with it.
Yeah, okay. Then I saw, who was next? I think I saw Mackenzie next.
Yes, I was just wondering if there's any like data showing like with this pandemic going on, if there was like a decrease with like the public transportation, how many people are taking it. I know me personally, I'm not gonna say I never rode public transportation because I did when I was in high school. But I always me and my parents, we always just drove our cars around. But when I was going to high school, I definitely did. But now thinking back to like people who have to go to school, even during the pandemic, like does that affect the amount of people who are on the public transportation, or do they stagger it, or like?
Yeah, well, obviously the pandemic hurt public transit because, we had the social distance, and I think that obviously in New York, what was interesting in New York City, for instance, was the expectation was that the COVID clusters would be found near the subway stations, but that wasn't true because what it is that people they'll drive in from suburban areas and then get on the train. So if they were to report as a person who had COVID-19, they would report wherever they were in their suburban area, not at the subway station. But where they did find hot spots was around popular bus stops. So if you think about it, people will walk to a bus stop in many cases. So if they test positive for COVID-19, they're close by. But just being in that enclosed space, any kind of enclosed space, plane, subway, bus, a lot of people either just stop riding altogether. But then it's a challenge. What if the only way you could get to go to work was on public transit? Then what are you going to do? So that's, that the pandemic posed a lot of difficulties for use of public transit. I think next I saw Kiana's hand up.
Yes. Okay, so I heard you talking about like how Nashville doesn't, they don't fund public transit. And I can second that because I know that my professor in civil engineering, we're doing a study about trying to implement more, instead of having the high occupancy vehicle lanes, we're trying to implement more high occupancy toll lanes. And that's still not public transit. It's really just people still being in their cars and still traveling. So like now that I see your perspective, I can honestly see how Nashville does not care about like buses and trains and things, because I had another thing to say, but I forgot it. But yeah, that's really all I wanted to say. Like they're still pushing like car transportation instead of bikes and instead of buses, instead of trains, instead of walking. They just want everyone to be in their cars, seems like.
Yeah, it's somewhat dangerous because biking is not part of the culture here. And I've seen people get angry because people are riding bikes in bike lanes.
Oh my God, yes.
And people get out, what are you doing out here on the roads? And so I had a colleague of mine who he decided he was going to start to ride his bike to TSU. I think he moved to Edge Hill. He was going to start riding his bike. He was riding for about 3 weeks. Somebody hit him, hit and run. If he hadn't had his helmet on, he would have been killed. So he recovered from that, stayed off the bike. Maybe about a year and a half later, he decides, let me get back out there. Gets on his bike. A month later, right on Charlotte Avenue, got hit again. Now this time he survived, but he got very severe dental damage. So it's people don't look. I mean, people don't look. They're not looking for bikes. They don't give you the proper spacing. It's just not part of the culture. Now, if you go to Seattle, Washington, everybody's on bikes there. I mean, it's crazy. I mean, you'll get hit by a bike before you get hit by a car in Seattle. There's just so many people, or Boulder, Colorado. I mean, but here it's just not part of the culture. Like I said, for years, or not for a few years, not that long ago, Tennessee was, we had the greatest obesity problem or overweight obese problem in the country of all states. And that's, partially the diet. We like to eat food that's good to us, but not good for us, and down here. And then you're not physically active. So, but that's changing. Like I said, we've got the greenways and the message is getting out there slowly. Let's see. See, Cameron's got a hand up.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, I know when we were talking about like up north, my aunt, she lives in like Washington, D.C., like the DMV area. And I know like we noticed when we were there, like a lot of like their like apartment complexes, like at the like below, they have like their grocery stores and stuff there. So like transportation there isn't as like they need it, but it's not as like they're not as dependent as we are like on our transportation. Like they use their like they have train stations and stuff near their apartment complexes, so it's not really necessary to have a car. But of course, you know, people still do. But like we just thought it's really like, of course we're starting to get that now. I know like in Nashville now they're having like the complexes with the grocery stores at the bottom. But like if people don't want to leave like their homes, they don't have to if they don't want to. Like I just thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, there's a name for that. It's called transit-oriented development. And so it's where residential development is created in and around transportation hubs for just that reason. So now it eliminates having to use a car because your home, supermarket, what have you, is right there next to a transit stop. Sounds good, but the problem is that there's gentrification associated with transit-oriented development, otherwise known as TOD. Because if you think about it, who normally lives near transportation hubs? People who don't have cars. So usually those were low-income areas. If you think about where the subway stations are, you know, like one of the more interesting parts of Atlanta is 5 Points down there. But so when developers start to see, oh, people want to get out of their cars, let's do transit-oriented development. Now you have wealthier people who want to get out of their cars. And if you think about it, a lot of lower income people are renters. So if you're living in a building, an apartment building, and you're renting, and a development interest comes in and wants to transform the community into a transit-oriented development area, and your building owner sells his building or her building for $10 million, guess what? You got to go. I mean, if you're a renter, you have no rights, no property rights. And I know people that's happening in Nashville a lot right now. Where I have a friend of mine, she was living in an older building. She was paying maybe $600, $650 a month for rent, lived right downtown in Nashville. That building got sold to a more exclusive upscale condo developer. They booted her. She didn't get booted out. You know, she stayed to the end of her lease, moved into another building close by. And mind you, this friend of mine does not have a car. She's never driven in her life, right? So, and she works right downtown for the Tennessee Higher Education Commission. Moved to another place downtown. Luckily, found some place affordable down there. Not $700 a month anymore. Now she's paying. Then she was paying like $1,200 a month. Could just barely afford it. That building got sold a year later to a hotel developer, and she had to move again into a development called the Cumberland, which is right at 6th and Church Street. And there's a whole history behind that. The Cumberland apartment building was like one of the very first new residential developments downtown about 20 years ago. I mean, like nobody was building new residential development downtown 20 years ago in Nashville. Nobody. And so the developer, Tony Guarantana, when he built it, people were like, nobody's going to move there. It's going to be a bust. He's going to lose all his money. Of course, everybody was wrong if you've been to downtown Nashville lately. So, yeah, so when we develop around transit hubs, it often results in gentrification. So what's happening now in a lot of cities is compromises are trying to be made between developers to try to require them. It's not really a compromise, to try to require them, or at least give incentives to provide affordable housing near those transit hubs. Because what happens ordinarily is what happens to people who are renters. They just get kicked out, big fancy condo comes in, and now those same people who live near the transit hub, but now they're way out somewhere nowhere near transit because they can't afford to live close to it. These are all very complex issues that we would have, again, or you could still study with this extra credit public transit field trip on your own, but we'll talk about that later. So let's see, where are we? It's good to have conversation. It goes to your class participation grade, of course. So I think that's everything, the syllabus. And so let's see. So what we're going to do now is take another 5-minute break. Like I said, today I told you and warned you, this is going to be a long one today. We're going to take a look. Well, let's come back at 2:50 Central Time, and then we will wrap it up. Not wrap it up. We'll have the actual lecture, and then that'll be it for today. We'll go right up to 3:45 Central today. So let's come back at 2:50. I'm going to